Hey, how's it
G'day.
going, Jono? How you doing?
Doing very well, thank you, my friend. I like listening to that music that we come in on.
You
Kind of
know,
makes me
that's
feel like I'd like to be in a cafe that plays that sort of elevator music.
yeah,
And
yeah. You like that? I think. Let me see if I can do it while we talk. If I wanted to, you
mm,
like that?
I like that. That's the kind of background music that I want in a cafe.
There you go. Well,
I like the
let's turn it
ambience.
off. But yeah, we can create that good ambience. So, what do you want
Hey,
to talk
Dave
about?
Tyler. G'day, Dave.
Hey, Dave Tyler,
Right
how
off the
are you?
bat. G'day from Rome, New York.
You
How are
know,
you, man?
one of the things that we wanted to do with this
Hey, Patty.
weekly, we figure, hey, Patty, we figure that if we do this every week on Thursday, same time.
Mm,
I think people will start catching on. I asked you before we went live. I don't know what else people would want to do. I mean, we're going to talk about the oldest, potentially the oldest inscription found in Jerusalem. I mean, that's a pretty. What could compete with that, right?
I have a lot of questions about
All right.
that because I know that you've read up on this, and so I want you to inform me, which is great because you'll be informing everybody in our coffee club. I hope, Dave and Patty, I hope you got a cuppa. We have.
That's
What
right.
what cup are you using? See,
I'm using
what's that one?
This is my United Nations cup, and some
Ooh,
people,
okay.
they might say, "Oh, I don't know about the United Nations," but it's if people have read, Ralph Bunton has a blog on
G'day, Ralphie.
Times of Israel, and he
Mm,
recently wrote an article about the United Nations, and one of the things that he puts in there is this idea of what it's supposed to be. It's an idea, an ideal world where
hmm
people can come, the Parliament of Men can come together. But yeah, it's just a cup I picked up when Dave and Patty and I and a few others went to the United Nations
All right, there you
for
go.
the ideal for the
I've
world.
just got
Yeah,
I've got the boring, nothing mug, but it's big, and it serves
that's
its
right.
purpose. Yorkshire tea is what I'm. And Patty's just saying that she's got a glass of wine there.
Okay, all
But,
right.
but you can be in our club, Patty. That's all right.
That's
So,
right.
so um, I do want to ask about this. Now, we've already talked about the inscription a number of months ago. The inscription that was, or the amulet rather, lead
Yeah.
amulet that was found
Mhm.
at what is now known as Mount Ebal.
Right,
In fact, within the what is understood to be Joshua's altar at
right,
Ebal.
right.
Should we start? How do you want to start? Because I was wondering if we should. Dave's saying he's got bourbon and a cigar. That'll
All
do.
right.
Um, should it be? Should we begin by saying, by reminding everybody what that is first, and what the objections are to it? When we talked about it initially, it was Professor Ralston that I don't know that he necessarily objected, but he raised some, I think, legitimate concerns. Maybe we should
Right.
touch on some of that. Where would you like to begin?
Yeah, no, that's actually a good idea because first of all, I wrote an article that you and I discussed. It's on my academia page about that discovery, just sort of bringing together the points that were being voiced at the time. But just so that people know, at Mount Ebal, at least according to Mount Ebal, according to the research of Adam Zertal and other people have accepted his theory, but we're talking about near Shechem,
Mm,
Nablus, in that area. And from what we understand from what's been released, Scott Stripling, and it just so happens that Gershon Galil, who
hmm
is part of this most recent discovery, which we're going to talk about, he was part of that as well. And what they found was a very small lead, like an amulet. It was folded, and we know of these things from later periods, but because of where this was discovered, it was discovered in dirt which had been removed and safely placed in a guarded area, basically, by Zertal's archaeology there at Mount Ebal, according to his research. That dirt had been pulled out, and then later it was gone through and wet sifted. And so, in
hmm
the wet sifting process, Scott Stripling's team, and there were others involved as well. Zvi Koenig, I believe, is part of that. He's written a book on the subject. anyway, they sent this off, and some of the people that were involved, there are 4 scholars involved, and the one that we're talking about tonight, Galil, Gershon Galil, was part of the team. They sent it off to be, you had to read this with special tools because it's folded, and so they
Mm.
came back with this idea. They
Now they
proposed,
didn't it wasn't unfolded. They
no,
had
not as
a
I
particular
understand.
machine that was able to scan this lead amulet and basically read what is on it without unfolding it. So
Right.
they sent it. I think it was in Sweden or something like that.
When it was sent off, they did read it, as I understand it, in its folded state.
Mm.
And what Professor Gershon Galil came back with, in the team, there are 3 others. They came back and they said this is a curse amulet, and it's very limited in text. It's like 40 characters, but it basically is a repetition of a phrase, a cursing, if you will. And in that, according to Gershon Galil, it actually has a form of the divine name. Instead of the tetragrammaton, the 4 letters, this is a 3-letter form of that name in the curse. In other
Yeah.
words,
So
like you're invoking God's name in this curse, right?
it may be Yahoo. It says it or something like that.
Yeah,
Um, Yeah, yeah. Now, when it was first released to the press, it was done so in what was speculated to be a fairly sensationalist way,
yeah,
saying that, "Oh, look, here is a curse found on the curse on the Mount of Cursing, and containing the name of God. Clearly, this confirms all the things, and
right.
it appealed to people's confirmation bias, I suppose, and ran around the world. And Professor Ralston had some, I think, fairly legitimate concerns about that. What were some of those?
Yeah, I think one of the things that stands out in both the Mount Ebal case as well as this curse inscription we're going to talk about tonight as well, the new one, if you will, is that there is a procedure that is sort of the way you ought to do it. Now what I'm telling you is that this is what scholars say. If you have a find and you want it to be put forward in the correct manner. The correct manner is often defined as you publish your findings in an academic article, and then that is peer reviewed, and so that other scholars, other qualified scholars, can counter. Based on, they all have the same. We have the best photographs. We have the drawings that you have, and rather than one scholar, brilliant as that scholar might be, releasing a find to the press, it's sort of not, in some circles, it's just considered that's not the way you should do it. There's a certain manner, and so we see that was one of the complaints. But some of the other things were based on what the other scholars had who want to counter it, who want to review it. They said that we don't see what he sees, basically. Okay.
Mm,
So, in
mm.
other words, I understand what you're saying, but based on what has been released, we can't even enter the discussion. So, that paper that I have on my academia site gives the actual, this is what it said, but it was curse, it was another curse amulet, if you will.
And, and not only is it another, but it's exceptionally similar. I mean, there's a great deal of similarities between the two. The one that we're about to discuss, that was discovered in Jerusalem, doesn't contain the name of a deity, or 3 letters of the Tetragrammaton, Yahoo, or
Right.
anything like that. But that's the primary difference, it would appear. This particular one that we're about to discuss is cursing a governor, apparently.
Yeah.
Um, but uh, but going back to the one found on Mount Ebal, it was purported to be confirming of uh, material within the Torah, or within Joshua. There's nothing in. It's not really quoting verbatim anything remotely like a Bible verse.
Yeah.
Uh, Other than that, Mount Ebal is supposed to be the Mount of Cursing. So,
Yeah, and
um,
the other thing to that point, yeah, there were claims that at least that were released in the initial press releases now. By the way, I should add this at this point. the team that is responsible for the discovery and the announcement of the Mount Ebal curse amulet and so forth, they have said we are and will publish an academic article that will be open for peer review. That's coming. Now, I haven't heard an update on that, and I am
As
watching
to
for
when
that
that'll
to
be.
appear.
Yeah.
But that was one of the main things. But to your
Hmm.
point, there were also claims that this discovery proved that, and I'm paraphrasing, this isn't exactly the way they said it, but it's sort of validated scripture. In other words, this proves well, one of the main things it proves is it's an association with a place that's at least been identified by Zertal and his team as this is Mount Ebal. And we
Hmm.
know from Deuteronomy 27 that Mount Ebal is the Mount of Cursing. And as you said, in Joshua as well. So there were some associations that were made. And of course, biblical fundamentalists picked this up and they ran with it. And they said,
Hmm.
wow, this is absolutely. And it's not that Professor Rolston and the others were just shooting cheap shots at it. They just said, we want to wait and see,
Yeah,
the
and
full
quite rightly
evidence.
so, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite rightly
Mhm.
so, because also to say that, "Oh, look, here is a curse that was found on Mount Ebal, therefore Mount Ebal is obviously the mount, it is the mount of cursing, and this is scripture related," is countered by the fact that a very, very, very similar discovery is said to be made in Jerusalem, and we know that the Temple Mount is not a is not a mount of cursing. So I think it's neither here nor there, and everyone is waiting for the peer reviewed and the enhanced photographs and all this sort of stuff.
That's right.
But anyway, it's important to talk about that first because, as you say, Galil is involved there. By the way, Dave just reminded us when we were in Israel in June. Dave and Ilan, g'day to Ilan Pomerantz. Ilan took Dave out to Shiloh, where he
That's right.
happened to meet Professor Stripling. So that
Mhm.
was just grand. I would have loved to have met him. G'day to Cassandra as well, who's tuned in. By the way, boys and girls, if you're there, Facebook or actually, if you are on Facebook, send us a message just to let us know that is streaming here for us. What we're seeing. So, but if you have any comments or questions, just let them fly as we go. Now, the latest discovery. Now, you said to me last week, and I didn't know this. You said that this latest discovery, or what we're reading about now, that was another, cursing that is on stone found in Jerusalem, was actually discovered 10 years ago.
That's
Fill me
correct.
in there. Oh, there we go. There's a Facebook user saying listening on Facebook. We don't know who that is. It's just Facebook user.
Yeah, it's
Anyway,
because it's probably coming from a private group, Jono. If it's a
there
private
we go.
group, it won't give the name. But
Ah,
so welcome to Facebook and YouTube.
thank
Yeah,
you, boys and girls.
one of the things that I think in all of the excitement that's
Mm,
been sort of brushed over or people may not know is that the stone tablet inscription, which is the central point of our show tonight, that when this was discovered, it was discovered in 2010. An archaeologist by the name of Eli Shukran, working for the Israel Antiquities Authority, was working on a site. Now, it's right near the Gihon Spring, and it's 82 feet from the Gihon Spring. And what they found in
just hang on. Just
2000.
remind everyone where that is. Where is the Gion?
Okay,
Where is the
well,
spring?
it's if we look at a map, we're going to find the Gihon Spring close to the city of David. You'll find it on your map. If you look at the city of David, you'll see the Gihon Spring. It plays an important part in the Bible. In fact, when David is old in First Kings and Solomon gets anointed to be the king, he goes to the Gihon Spring. So this particular spring of water is very important in that, if you recall the story of the invasion of Sennacherib, when he's coming, the Israelites need to get the water source inside the city. So you and I have done a couple of things on the Siloam inscription. So
Yep.
we seem to be sort of focusing on this area right now. In fact, today I had a long back and forth getting video and graphics from Daniel Wright looking at this particular area because we're so into it right now. So they're working on this archaeological dig there near the Gihon Spring, and they uncover what is it's best described, at least by Eli Shuchan and Ronnie Reich the next year in 2011 works with him. They're calling it the Matsava Temple, sometimes known as the Pillar Temple. Now, Matsava is a standing stone, right? It becomes forbidden later in the Pentateuch, but in the patriarchal times, we read about it all over the place. Remember in Genesis 28,
Hmm.
Jacob is leaving and he sets up a stone and pours
And
oil on
anoints
it.
it. Mm,
So that becomes taboo later, let's just say. It becomes
sure.
forbidden later in the Torah, but in the patriarchal times, it's not so, you know.
Let me just ask you a question
Yep.
about this. I seem to recall reading that this particular temple was Canaanite, not Israelite. Is that correct?
Well, there are some debates.
Okay.
And one of the things that's interesting about that, I did read that in some of the reports, but one
Mm,
of the things that stands out, there are some differences in this temple in that the orientation, all right? Now, what direction do we find temples in the Bible? Where is the worshiper facing? If you think about the tabernacle and the temple, you have the entrance from the east.
mm,
So the worshiper, if you will, is facing the west,
hmm.
right? And you know, in Ezekiel, we even have this condemnation of priests who are facing the east, basically with their back to the Holy of Holies. And this isn't. So in other words, if you think about an Israelite worship place, whether you're talking about the tabernacle or the temple, the worshiper is facing the west. Now, the thing that is interesting about this, what is so called the Matsava Temple or the temple complex discovered by Eli Shukran in 2010, is that it's oriented as we would expect to find what later becomes acceptable in Hebrew worship. So it's not in other words, if you find Canaanite or pagan temples in the Levant, you're going to find them not according to this Hebrew pattern. So it doesn't seem, at least in Shukran and Ronnie Reich, those guys, they don't see this as a pagan temple, interestingly enough. They do, however, see it as a very early, I don't want to say kosher worship site, but in a way, that's what they're saying. It's not,
Okay.
so it's really a fascinating
I didn't
place.
know that.
And
Mm,
and I didn't either until I found, and I'll put the links in this video. But one of the papers that I found is by Eli Shukran and Yoel Ben Nun,
hmm.
and it's called a Matsava Temple from the period of the patriarchs in the city of Salem, later the city of David.
Right.
So it's
Okay.
it's
I'll have to read it.
interesting. Yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
a fascinating study. It's not written for an academic audience, meaning it's not something that you would, although it's very well written,
Mm,
and there are certain caveats in the flow of the paper, like they'll say, this puts us at the time of Abraham. Uh, if one believes that Abraham, in other words, they give that if Abraham did exist, then. But
sure.
but let's talk a little bit about that complex. There's several things that make this a very interesting find. There was an altar room. It's interpretation that I'm going on now. What the
Sure.
archaeologist interpreted. There's a room that has an altar. There's a small olive press, which they said it's too small to be used for a big operation, but maybe for some sort of special holiness which goes on within this temple complex. It's
Sure.
not enough to support a village. It's not like a big olive press, something small. Again, they found pottery shards dating 3,700 years ago, roughly. So we're talking about 18th century BCE, which,
Mm,
according to most chronologically, people who study the Bible would say chronologically, it puts you about the time of the patriarchs, right? So if that's the case, and we use the Bible as sort of a rule here, you're in the patriarchal period.
sure.
And so again, you have the worshipers facing uh, the west, and so the entrance is from the east. The thing that I found interesting about this as well is that this temple complex appears from the archaeological findings to have been in operation, Jono, for about 1,000 years. This is longer than the first and second temple period, the activity of the first temple and the second combined. So this temple functioned as such, it appears, from the 18th century BCE
Hmm.
all the way up to the 8th century BCE, which is roughly the time of Hezekiah. And one of the things that Eli Shukran finds is that it wasn't destroyed. As he puts it in his paper, it was carefully interred. It was like, we're going to fill it. We're going to fill it with dirt and we're going to cover it, but we're not going to go in and bash down this thing and totally destroy it. It was, in his understanding, this told him that this was considered a sacred place,
Hmm.
no longer in use, right?
Huh.
Now, one of the things that they found in this structure not only was the matzava, the standing stone, which was really pretty thin. It's only like 2 inches in thickness, but it was stood up on purpose. It wasn't like you just got to that point in the archaeology and said, "Oh, there's a." No, it was clearly wedged between rocks, and his interpretation is that this was for something like we read in the patriarchal narratives in the Bible.
Sure.
But within this temple complex, there was a stone that was discovered, somewhat square, and on the stone, Eli Shukran believes that he sees writing, some form of writing. Now, remember, now it's something which has been etched into this like limestone,
Right.
so there's no color to it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so let me just jump in there for a second. There's and this is perfect timing, of course, but another article in Haaretz came out about this stone and about this etching, this inscription, and you can find that. I guess we'll put that in the comments section.
right.
But looking at it, there's an excellent photo of it there, and to the untrained eye, such as myself, it really just looks like it's been chiseled out. It just looks like chisel marks to me.
Yeah,
Uh, a lot of experts are saying it just looks like chisel marks. We don't
right.
see photographs that are sufficient for us to deduce that there are, in fact, Phoenician alphabet letters there.
Hmm.
Um, it's interesting, but the claim is go ahead. So the claim, as
Yeah,
far as
no, and
this,
you you
because
you said
my understanding is that he says, look, I can see that this looks like something is written on it. I'm not so sure what it is. He showed it to a number of scholars, and they went, But when he put it before Galil, right? Is that right?
that's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and you made a point. I just want to underscore what you said. Neither you nor I am claiming to be an expert. This is out of my field. I mean, I'm a
Mm.
Bible teacher. And so I claim no expertise, but I have worked through what the experts are currently saying. So I'm glad you brought that up. So I don't want somebody, to log on and go, "Oh, these guys are, experts." And
Yeah, no, I
I'm
wouldn't.
neither an epigrapher nor the son of an epigrapher, as
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wrote.
yeah. That's right.
James has used that. He actually gave me that line. But what Eli Shukran believed when he saw it was, hey, this might have some form of writing on it. Now I'll just say I've worked a couple of archaeology digs as just a laborer. That's all I am. Carry buckets of, and I'm always, Jonah, I'm always picking something up, and I'm going talking to the guy leading it, one of the lead archaeologists. Hey, did, I think I see an ancient letter on here, and he's like, no, 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 that's it's actually a smushed bug. Just throw it away, whatever. But
Yeah.
so I don't have that trained eye either. But Eli Shukran thinks that he sees something. He does go to other authority figures and ask them, "What do you think?" And they say, "I don't know, I don't know." Now that was in 2010, but he doesn't throw this away. He takes this stone tablet this block, which, as I understand, it appears to be about 300 or 400 years younger than the temple complex. So it's not 3,700 years old. They think it's about 3,300 years old.
Hmm.
So it's part, and then it was then used, they believe, in a secondary use. In other words,
It was
somebody
repurposed.
later takes this stone with the inscription. They probably didn't notice it, and
Mm,
just said, "Hey, this is perfect for this hole in the wall
sure.
here."
Mm,
So Shukran saves it, like you said, shows it to Galil, and Galil looks at it. I don't know how long he studied it, and he makes an announcement on July the 7th. And Jono, he says he can read it. So
mm.
other people have looked at it and they didn't see anything other than what they thought were chisel marks, but he sees an ancient he calls it a proto-Canaanite script.
Okay. And now this is where it gets a little bit curious. I'll use the word curious just to be kind, because
Okay.
what he sees is almost identical, almost, to what he sees in this Ibal lead amulet. Before I go any further, Stacey said that she's watching and she's watching on Facebook. I seem to recall, Stacey, that it was your birthday recently. Is that right? If it was,
Hey,
happy
Stacy.
birthday. And g'day to Ben. Which structures are we talking about, Ben? We're talking about the structures.
It's called the Matsava Temple complex. It was discovered in 2010 by Eli Shukran doing a dig near the Gihon Spring, about 82 feet, 25 meters from the Gihon Spring. And they discovered it's like 5 chambers within this, what he's interpreted as a temple complex.
Now, so it is a curious thing that Galil sees a similar inscription, number one. And that's not to say that it's not there, it's just
Right.
highly curious. The other thing about it is, well, I'll come back to that. No, go ahead.
Okay. So here's what Galil is saying.
Hmm.
And I'm getting this using his own words. I went to his Facebook page where the release was published, and this is his own quote. Now, by the way, let me tell you who the players are here. So, Professor Gershon Galil is the head of the Institute of Biblical Studies and Ancient History at Haifa University. He's also the former chair of the Department of Jewish History. He has quite an impressive list of accomplishments, books, articles, and he is one of the people that the IAA would go to interpret an inscription. So, for instance, you and I on our Tanakh tours often go to the Valley of Elah, where the battle between David and Goliath took place,
Mm,
and there's this dig right there at Kirbat Kiafa, and they recently, not so long ago, found an inscription there. And it
hmm.
was the same. The story sounds a little bit similar. I don't know. Maybe there's some writing here. Well, guess who? They get Professor Galil. Professor Galil goes there, and in my recollection, he identifies not scratches on this piece of broken pottery, this ostrich or whatever.
Hmm.
He says, I see 69 characters, I believe it was. Well, so this set off a host of debate, just like this newest one. The last two have actually. And so a big debate. And to date, I believe there have been 40 some odd academic articles back and forth. Is this right? Is it? And now of the 69 characters that were identified, I believe now that other scholars generally are in agreement that they can see 40. So you can go from
Okay.
uh, chisel mark scratches, just dirt and pebbles did this over time,
Yeah.
to okay, all right. So here's what I'm wondering, and I certainly am not qualified to weigh in either way. But could we have with Professor Galil someone who is just damn good at this. Like he's
Mhm.
got the eye for it. You know what I'm saying? It could be. It could be.
I let me read the way that this Haaretz article finishes. It says, "The bottom line is that some do see and some don't see
Right.
Galil's sketch and the markings on the rock fully corresponding. He Once he publishes his findings and other scholars have the opportunity to evaluate the theory, we should know more. For the time being, the rock seems, in my humble opinion, says the writer, to be like a Rorschach test of sorts. So you see what you want to see." Um,
Now let's just
Go
qualify
ahead.
this because, as I understand it, this is a writer for Haaretz who
Mm,
says that, right?
mhm.
So it would be like if I looked at it, and I'd say, "Hey, I see chisel marks," but let's
Ilan Galid, by the way, is the author.
yeah,
Ilan Galid.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, he may have more qualifications than that, but I don't think, and I think he makes it clear in his article, which by the way is a great article, but I think he makes
Mm,
it clear that he's not an expert in this either. Now,
mm.
one thing just to kind of set the stage in the discovery on July the 7th, Professor Galil post an article or post an announcement on his Facebook page, right?
Mhm.
And he announces the discovery. And one of the things that he says that this is the earliest quote, the earliest and most important inscription discovered to date in Jerusalem. Okay, now
So now
that's a
that is a big
big thing.
thing.
Yeah,
That's a big thing. Now, and the reason also that causes one to be cautiously curious is because only a few weeks, maybe a couple of months before that, he was saying the same thing about this lead inscription, lead amulet that was found in Mount Ebal,
yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. And prior to these two finds, which seem to be saying very similar things and that are declared to us by the same scholars, that I think it is understood that the silver scroll, the amulet that we see in the Israel Museum, was declared to be the oldest, at least the oldest biblical quote
Yeah, this
from the
is
Torah.
different though. Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
From a biblical perspective, but where it's close to quoting a Bible text.
Mm.
But his claim is clearly
It's a big
I
deal.
mean, it's a big deal. And so like Professor Rolston, and we'll get into both of these, but Professor Rolston does counter, and he publishes the same day but late that night. So it's like in U.S. time.
Hmm.
The post on Galil's page shows up pretty early in the morning, 7, 8 o'clock. By around almost midnight, Professor Rolston responds. Now, Professor Rolston, most people might know both of these professors, but just to give a little bit of background on him, he is the professor of Northwest Semitic languages and literature at George Washington University. Also, very impressive list of
Mm.
accomplishments, books and articles, and so both of these are legitimate, very solid, well established, respected scholars, and so both of them, as someone like me who is a student of these things, who's not an expert, I'm interested in what both of them have to say. I want to see the debate go back and forth. I can follow the debate, but one of the things that Professor Ralston says is that the claims that are being made are so sensational that the evidence has to support it. If you're going to make a sensational claim, then we have to have the evidence. And one of his points is he says, I just don't. Of course, he doesn't have the photographs. He's not looking. He has the photographs that we might have. He doesn't have, the high definition where he can zoom in and work on this inscription. But so
Hmm.
so the announcement is made on the 7th. Here's a piece of that announcement, Jono. He says, this is at 7:54 a.m. July 7th. I'm happy to inform you that I've deciphered the Jerusalem Stone Tablet. He says, see my drawing below. This is the earliest and most important inscription discovered to date in Jerusalem. It was found in the compound of the temple near the Gihon spring by Eli Shukran. I've already covered that. In these excavations, a temple and a pillar were also unearthed. The inscription was written on a rectangular stone tablet, 26.7 centimeters wide, 20.8 centimeters long. But he goes on to say the inscription has been found in its entirety. Now, here's what the inscription says. Are we ready to go there, you think?
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, this is the translation published by Gershon Galil in his post, and I'm sure in other places it's been quoted as well. I put 2 papers out on it. This is what I use. Cursed, cursed, you will surely die. Cursed, cursed, you will surely die. Governor of the city, you will surely die. Cursed, you will surely die. Cursed, you will surely die. Cursed, you will surely die. Now, listen, this is,
Oh
it's,
man, I know it. I love these. Both of them. It sounds like an angry old man shaking
yeah.
his walking stick at somebody. Get off my lawn.
Well,
Um,
think about this too. We have, particularly in the United States, we have people are at each other's throat in the
oh yeah.
political. And so this is like we don't even have to name a politician. Pick your politician, whoever the most hated person in the world. If this person today that's so hated, if
Mm,
he lived at this time, this is the only thing I can imagine. I know people today who would take the time to chisel into stone their hatred for
absolutely.
a certain
Sure.
politician in the U.S. Right?
But it's not just a piece of graffiti here. I mean, it's
Yeah.
understood that there's a superstition involved in this. This is an incantation of sorts. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. And of course, Professor Galil, he does present sort of an interpretive framework, his interpretive framework based on his ability to read this and to see what he sees. And then he says, "Look, this is the obvious is that whoever is writing this, etching this into the limestone." It clearly believes that it is for the purpose of cursing. We might say hexing today. A lot of people
Mm,
got all excited
fixing.
because he used the term voodoo, but I think in his mind he means to suggest that whoever did this felt like it possessed
Affecting.
how it was
Yeah.
affecting. Yeah, and he even sees in this inscription, and you can look his many you and I have talked to him and looked at his drawing together, but the
Mm,
drawing itself, it shows that in the stone tablet there are holes bored, is his interpretation, in a circular pattern, which he interprets it could be maybe this person who's putting the hex on the governor of the city is intending to draw his face. I don't know. This is what he says. And
mm.
so then it's like you would stick a doll. You would be
Right.
like, may you feel pain in your and the guy's like, "Oh, I feel it. I feel it." So, but this
Wow.
isn't we can because it's so foreign to us, we might look at it and say, "Oh, that's silly," or whatever. But in the time, I mean, we're
Mm.
talking 300 years ago, whoever wrote this felt like it'd be like putting an ugly tweet up about
Oh,
somebody today and cursed are
even
you. I hope he dies. That
even
kind of.
more so with an expectation of affecting some sort of pain or disadvantage or curse to the obviously a curse to this particular individual. But it seems like to be a passionate disdain by which they have to go to such trouble because it really is. If the letters are there,
Yeah,
it's significant effort to etch that into stone.
that's
Now,
right.
as I mentioned, looking at the stone, it looks to my eyes, it just looks like chisel marks. But we have a depiction supplied to us by Galil. What?
Galil. Yeah.
Thank you. So what? But it's not. It's not overlaid with a photograph of the actual stone. What are we looking at here? Because it looks very different to what we're looking at when we see the stone.
Well, first of all, just to qualify, when we look at the stone, we're looking at anyone who has been to Jerusalem or anywhere in Israel, and you notice this cream colored Jerusalem stone, this like limestone, it's similar in color to what you have on your microphone there. So
Hmm.
if you look at that color, and then you have an etching in that color with no color in the etching,
Hmm.
and so some of the people who are critical of Galil are looking at the photos we're looking at, and of course you can't see anything in there.
It's difficult because all you have to go by is the contrast of shadow upon
That's
the
right.
rock, and
That's right.
we'd like to see various angles of that to try and make sense of it. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so I have not, nor have I received permission from Professor Galil to publish or post anything,
Mm,
in terms of can I use your drawing or anything like that.
mm,
I did take a screenshot of his Facebook page because that's public, and I gave credit or
cool.
whatever. But what he is claiming is that if you have a trained eye, and if you're looking at the object before you, you will see what he drew on his drawing. And so when I did an exercise, we'll talk about it in a few minutes, where I used his drawing, he wrote me and said, "Hey, good job on that." But he said, "Next, try to do it with the stone." Now, that's a fun challenge. I would happily do that if I had the stone, a good photograph of the stone, which I don't have. And that's one of the things that these other scholars are complaining about is
Yeah.
we can't possibly confirm or deny. Now, some are denying without any proof one way or the other because
Mm.
they just, they'd rather be safe than sorry. It's easier just to say, he's wrong. Well, how do we know he's wrong? You just said you haven't seen good photographs. Here is a qualified expert, seemingly a very well educated, esteemed scholar who's
Mm.
made certain claims. The best answer I think in this case would be I have reservations, I have to be honest, but
Mm.
I'm going to hold my reservations pending either good photographs, a time to inspect face to face with this stone, or the academic publication that's supposedly coming.
So, Daniel, g'day, Daniel. Daniel just said taking a revised photo is so doable. No doubt it's been done, Daniel, and I guess that's the frustration of so many is saying why can't we have it? But the interesting thing, I think, and this is probably something that you could do, Daniel, is he says deliberately angled light to create shadows. That's right. So various contrasts by way of shadow to see those particular letters. But the other thing that can be done, I would imagine, because we know where the holes are, you can see the holes,
Right.
and the depiction of the letters also shows where the holes are. If the depiction was made transparent or translucent, I guess the word is, and lined up and sized up over the actual stone where the holes are, then maybe we'd be able to see what he's looking at and be able to sort of get a better idea. I'm sure that's been done. Why hasn't it been made available? I'm sure Daniel could do it,
Yeah,
but
if I just had a little bit to work with, we could, obviously Daniel could help us, but we don't have. But here, just to kind of show you, it's not everyone has taken a side against Galil. Let me give you a couple other things. Remember, we
mhm,
said that Eli Shukran discovers this stone inscription. He says in the article that was just published today, he said, "I saw that there was an inscription there." So now remember, Rolston and some others are saying, and these are well respected, esteemed
mm.
scholars too. They're saying, I don't even see an inscription. I'm not so sure it's anything more than chisel
Well,
marks.
well, just on that, before you continue, your buddy Mathieu Rochelle
Yeah,
says something similar. He says my first reaction was that I'm not sure it's an inscription at all because we have many lines that could be accidental striations made by a tool, and I'm very much skeptical. He says I'm very much not convinced that it's an inscription at all. Adding, I would prefer it to be an inscription, but it's completely unclear to me that it is. Go ahead.
well, so that's a good point, and that's what I was going to get to. You have some who have said, and you and I have talked about Matthew. Matthew is one of my favorite people in turn, even though he takes a different view on
The Moses
Shapira's
scroll.
manuscript,
Hmm.
but I like his work. I think he's come up with arguments that deserve answers. So his point is valid. Now listen to this. Now, this is in the article that was published in just today, and let me give the title, even though I'll post it later. It's called, let me see, um, it is called Controversy Rages Over Jerusalem Curse Inscription. It was published today, just hours ago on
Hmm.
Haaretz, and that's where you just quoted Matthew from. Now, this is what I found interesting, and it says, meanwhile, none of the above scholars have seen the Jerusalem rock or high resolution photos. Admittedly, they've all said that because Galil hasn't released them, nor would he name scholars who had seen them. He declined to share such photos with other epigraphers who could corroborate his impression of the rock until this week. Now, get this, Jono, when he invited two distinguished scholars to view and evaluate them, Ugaritic scholar Daniel Sivan and Israel Prize laureate Shmuel Ahituv, both emeritus scholars of Ben Gurion University. All right. Ahituv had expressed support for Galil's work ahead of the viewing. Both agree that there is writing on the slab, and that Galil's reading of it is correct. Ahituv says, there are there, all the letters are there. Savan also confirms that the letters are clearly visible in the photos. Now, again, you have this reporter for Haaretz who says, yeah, I looked at it. I don't see. It looks like chicken scratch to me. He didn't say that, but you get it. Chisel marks or whatever. But here are two, evidently, people who are qualified or seemingly
Sure.
somewhat qualified, and they've seen good photographs. So it makes a world of difference if you're looking again at tan writing or a tan engraving in a tan rock. Now, there's a guy by the name of Deutsch, Robert Deutsch,
Hmm.
who is another expert, antiquities specialist, and one of the, as I understand, one of the leading experts at understanding and reading these ancient scripts. Now he did not see the photographs or the stone, but based on the drawing that Galil published, he
Mm.
says it's clear as day to me. It says what he says it says.
Well, based on the drawing. Oh, well,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. So again,
yeah,
I'd like to see an overlay of the two.
yeah.
Let's give it. Let's proceed from this point, giving it the benefit of the doubt, Ross,
Think you
because
have to.
you have to. Because there's something that I want you to inform me on, because it brings us back to the Moses scroll a little bit. I think that is the use of the hey, translated as the in English, and the use of the vav as a vowel in this stone inscription. What is particular about those? What is being said about these aspects of the inscription?
Okay, so first I'll start with the hey, and let me just say, in biblical text, hey is the definite article. So if you want to say, in this case, you want to say the, whether it's the governor or however you want to say, if you want to describe something definite in the
Mm,
language, you put a hey. That in and of itself is nothing in terms of that doesn't prove or disprove anything. What's so interesting about this is that biblically that's a known deal. We have a definite
mm,
article, but according to the experts, of which I am not, according to the experts, they didn't believe that there was a definite article at the age to which this is being dated by Professor Galil. So they say if it's that old, I wouldn't expect to find the definite article in there. All right, that's the first point. In fact, I think I was looking for it in here to read exactly their response in that sense, but uh, that's one of the main problems. Here it says, okay, one problem scholars have with Galil's claim. I'm quoting from the Haaretz article today regarding the Jerusalem inscription, which he dates to the 13th century BCE based on the shape of the letters, is that it contradicts current understanding of how the Hebrew language and orthography developed. We'll talk about the development of orthography in a moment with the Vav.
Hmm.
It deals with spelling as orthography. But then one professor, Naom Mizrahi of the Hebrew University, says if if my beliefs of the way the language evolved are challenged, that does not necessarily disprove the validity or the authenticity of this
Sure.
inscription. Because we're always learning, as we discover, we say, wow, that I never knew. But this is something that we thought we knew. So here's what it says. According to his reading, meaning Galil's reading, the inscription includes the use of the definite article equivalent to the English word the, which in Hebrew is simply a single letter hey. Not only does the definite article not appear in Hebrew for hundreds of years after the 13th century BCE, it is unknown in any Semitic language until well into the first millennium BCE. So the point being that this is a very late development in the language. You just didn't have a way to say the definite article, you know. In fact, in Hebrew, we don't have, the article a and, you just, it's part of the language. But
Mm.
the definite article is what throws them. Now, Galil is arguing that he's for sure. He says this is it. I'm telling you, this is what it is. Now, what's interesting, if he's right, if what he draws is what he sees and what he sees proves out. Did you follow that? In other words, if his drawing really is what he says it is and he's properly reading it,
Mm.
this phrase that's translated the governor of the city is
Mm.
something we do know from this area. We know it from the Bible. We have 5 cases where this particular um, uh, title is used. The book of
Okay.
Judges, I have all these listed out on my paper. But early in the biblical text, all the way up through the book of Kings. So it's not, it may be Nehemiah. I think it's in Nehemiah as well.
Hmm.
So it's not unusual that this particular title is used, but it's just, it doesn't jive according to the academic argument against Galil. They're saying it can't be that early and have the definite article.
Hmm.
Now, the other argument is about the use of internal vowels in the language. So, for instance, there's if you pick up any basic Hebrew grammar book, it's going to tell you there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and they are all consonants. Right? I see some
Hmm.
questions coming in. We'll catch
This
some of
is
them.
Daniel's. Daniel's just saying that he's right now he's attempting to create an overlay of the drawing and the best instance of the stone inscription I could locate. So there's got to be places, Daniel, where the holes are easy to line up. I would imagine, but you're doing it. I mean, I'm imagining that this is the case. Cassandra's
Right?
just saying after reading about what happened to Shapira, I don't blame Galil for not wanting to show more people his inscription. This is an interesting thing
Yeah.
because if someone is convinced of a particular artifact and what it says, then
Right.
they don't necessarily feel the need to placate the academic community first. Why do it that way? Let's let it fly first, and then once it's done the rounds, then okay, then I'm going to open it to everyone else. Maybe this is just what he's doing.
Yeah, and Jono, let's tie in. We talked a lot about the Siloam inscription. Let me just say this about the example before us today. As
Mm.
a non specialist, but an interested non specialist, me, as someone in my position who's looking at this, here's what it reminds me of.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, Shapira's looking at what everyone else is looking at. He has, the you know what the arguments were? We don't have good copies. We don't. They didn't have the photographs, so that wasn't the argument. What were they
Mm.
saying? We don't have a good squeeze. We don't have a good cast. We don't have a good drawing. And Shapira's saying, "Listen to me. I'm looking at this, and I see that it says 1,200 and 1,000." And you know what
Mm.
everybody else said? It's not biblical
200
Hebrew.
and
No,
a
and
thousand. Yeah.
and what did they say? It's not biblical.
Mm.
It doesn't match what you're telling me. We know that that's not the way language
Mm.
evolved. It sounds like,
It does. Yeah.
so, and you know what, you and I are talking about this today, and I'm saying, I don't know, man. Matthew Rochelle and Christopher Rolston, I mean,
Ralston.
these
Yeah.
are the big players. These are giants in the field.
Mm.
And you know what, it's the same as my story about the Siloam inscription.
Mm.
It could
It
be, maybe they're
it really
exactly
is. No, it's very, very fair.
but you had
And
Stacey
that
and
being the case,
Neubauer.
if we give
Yep.
him the benefit of the doubt, then you can understand why he might go this route first. Let everybody know first because he's sure of the facts, and then fill in the academic community with all of the details after that. But we're still keenly waiting those details in any case. Now, you were about to tell us. Sorry to interrupt you, but you were about to bring us up to speed on the vav, the use of the vav as a vowel there,
Yeah. So
and how that pertains to the Shapira scroll.
So the basic argument is what Galil is saying, and this is my non-specialist understanding of what
Sure.
he's communicating. He is suggesting that this find is informing us of something, and that is this: the use of internal vowels is a earlier than we think, number one, and it wasn't consistent. You didn't necessarily have to use them. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And so we'll talk about Shapiro in just a moment and what triggered in my mind when I heard this argument. So he's basically saying, look, it is interesting. Now, by the way, people who look this up and get this article from the article that I posted, one of the things that you'll see is that on this stone tablet, Galil sees 20 words and 63 letters. 20 words, 63 letters. Now, of that 20 words, guess what 7 of them are? Curse,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not like it's 20 different. We don't learn a lot of vocabulary from studying the stone inscription, but here's what we do learn. We learn about a political office called the governor of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And we already know this from the biblical narratives.
Sure.
And we learn the other thing that we learn is cursed and dying you will die.
Mm.
You remember when in the Garden of Eden, when God tells Adam and Eve, the day that you eat thereof, mut tamut, dying you will die. That is the exact phrase, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
that appears on this tablet
Okay.
7 times.
Mm.
So you have cursed, 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 and you have dying you will die, dying you will die, dying you will die. That's basically all this is. It's
Mm.
it's just hateful. I hate this guy. They're the never governors, if you catch my joke. Uh,
Yep.
but so this is what this is. Now, what he's suggesting is, let me just read this part. In addition, the inscription includes the use of the letter wa, or some people who are studying Hebrew might see this in their grammar book as vav, as a vowel equivalent to the English letter u. Originally, Hebrew and other Semitic languages did not write out vowels at all, and wa would only be used as a consonant equivalent to English's w. So now these internal vowels are the question. People begin to wonder at what stage did scribes begin to incorporate these into a word to help the reader with pronunciation. It's part of the evolution of the language. And there's all sorts of arguments about when that happened. And you have several letters that are used as vowel letters. in Hebrew grammars, we tend to use the words matris lectionis, mothers of reading,
Hmm.
and they're believed to come in pretty late. Now, let me give an example of one that people might know in the Bible. We know the name David. It's one of the most frequently used
Hmm.
names and
David.
words in the Bible, David. Now, in Hebrew, you'll see David spelled Dalet, Beit, Yud Dalet, and then at times it's spelled without the Yud. Now, when it has the vowel letter, it's called by these grammarians full. The word is full. It's full of
Hmm.
vowels. And when it's not, it's called light. It doesn't have the vowel. We think most of the grammar books that I've read and the linguists today would hold the view, my simplistic way of explaining it, that anciently they did not use these vowels, these consonants, as vowel letters, mothers of reading. And then at some stage they come in. What
Hmm.
Galil is suggesting is that they begin to come in earlier than we thought, and that it was not so strict. Like there wasn't a bulletin put out in the Oriental newspaper, in 3400 BCE that said, okay, from now on, henceforth and forever, we're going to spell this word with a vowel letter.
Oh,
He says
I
that's
have to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
Yep.
Can you put a bookmark right there? Because Daniel is so brilliant that while we are talking, he has done what. This is
What's he
really good,
done?
Daniel. So he has lined up the drawing uh, with using the holes, the bullet holes, if you like,
Okay.
uh,
Can
with
you
the
show that?
actual stone inscription. Yeah, send that on to Ross in Messenger as well, because that is really good. We won't go on about it because if you don't mind, Daniel, maybe we can use this and we'll put this in the comments later on so that everyone else can see
That's
it.
right. That's right. Yeah,
But
we
that's an
can.
exceptional,
And
yeah.
what we'll do is we're going to edit this video down and post it with photographs and just like we've done the other things. So
Now let me just before we continue, let me just sing Daniel's praises here because I knew he'd be able to do this.
I'm so glad
I
he's
mean,
here tonight. Yeah.
this is really good, and just to highlight his handiwork, behind you, of course, is the cover of your book, which he designed,
Yeah.
and he's just really, really clever, and he's the man to do this. So thanks for doing that, man. I'll take a closer look at that later, but not everyone, obviously, well, no one else can see it, so we better get back to it.
Right.
But sorry to interrupt you, Roscoe.
No, that's okay. Now that everybody is saying, well, I'm not going to be able to listen until I see this photograph.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, so here's the response. Um, the earliest case of matrix lectionis, meaning
Mm,
the consonants used in the vowel sense, in Hebrew is the royal steward inscription that dates to the late 8th century BCE. This is Rolston, right? He
mhm.
says, if there were internal matrix lectionis in the Canaanite period, why don't we have them much earlier in Hebrew? Rolston explains the problem. It makes no sense. Why aren't they in the earliest Hebrew inscriptions? I mean, they're just not
Not
there.
there. Mm,
That's what he says. Now, here's what Galil says, and I'm paraphrasing. I had a personal back and forth with Galil, and he says they absolutely are there. They absolutely are there. Here's one of the things he says. Galil rebuts that there are numerous examples of the use of matrix lexenis in Ugaritic, a related Semitic language used on the Mediterranean coast of modern day Syria at roughly the same period. Hence, it's plausible that they were used occasionally in Jerusalem too. Beyond these objections, there's a problem that some scholars simply don't see what Galil claims to see on the stone. So you
mhm,
have these two reputable scholars who've taken totally different stance. Um, and it's become critical, meaning they're criticizing. It's almost ad hominem at times, And I even wrote an article about the tendency of scholarship about this particular. I thought, my
mm,
humble opinion, reading Professor Rolston's remarks about Galil's work, I thought it was unprofessional. I'll just be honest with you. I
Hmm.
thought it was rude and I thought it crossed a line. That doesn't mean that I don't have a lot of respect for the talents and abilities of Professor Rolston. We can only admire his intelligence in this kind of
Oh,
stuff. But
brilliant man, of
by the
course.
same token, there were comments that I thought it's just my opinion. I thought they could have been taken down a notch.
Hmm.
So now what we're faced with is we have two, what I think are very intelligent scholars who have taken totally different positions. Now, one of the things that Professor Rolston says about this is, let me make sure that I don't misquote. He basically says that he's just simply incorrect. Let's see. I'm just looking for his exact quote, but it's in my paper, The Tendency of Showing Great Scholarship.
That we
Uh,
talked about last week.
yeah,
Mm.
that's right. Okay, here it is. The esteemed epigrapher, this is my words, then turns to Galil's claim for the presence of internal matrix lexinese in this inscription. He says, Galil refers to Ugaritic as a parallel, but this, says Professor Ralston, is incorrect. He just dismisses it right out. It is incorrect. And he says Galil believes there's some 7 examples of a Vav mater lexionis in this inscription. Well, this erroneous assumption entirely erodes any confidence in his reading and his translation.
Hmm.
He says it's problematic and very difficult to believe. And then, he gets into things, as I was describing a moment ago, that I thought were a little bit too far. Now, the question becomes, who's right?
Hmm.
Who's right? Because both have these arguments. Now, let's talk about this for just a moment. If, for instance, Professor Galil is right, and this gradual inclusion of the vowel into the mother of reading is beginning to be used at an early stage, something like 3,300 years ago, but
Hmm.
it's not so firmly established that everyone is doing it. Then that sort of opens up some interesting discussions. For instance, one of the things that whenever the Shapira manuscript comes on the scene, the initial response was, hey, wait a minute. This manuscript is a forgery and it wants to be very old.
Mm.
So the forger is mimicking something that he thinks is clearly confirmed to be old, i.e., the Moabite stone, the Moabite stela, the Mesha stone. So in that stone, this is so old, we're talking 9th century BCE, that these words are spelled without the vowel letters. So in a lot of cases, when you look at the orthography, the spelling of Hebrew in the Moses scroll, or as Edan Dershowitz calls it,
The valediction of Moses.
the valediction of Moses,
Mm.
you do see some of the words are spelled without vowels. So what they said, the detractors and those who said it was a forgery, said he knows what old looks like. So his idea is to use something without vowels to make it look older.
But it's not consistent, though, is it?
It's not always consistent. You get the impression. So what Gutta in his book, which we've
Hmm.
talked about as well, but
Just
in
show us.
Gutta's book,
So once
yeah,
again, let me just interrupt. So that again is the artistic brilliance of Daniel Wright, who designed the cover of that book, and that's the English translation of Goethe's first time translated into English, thanks to Dave and Patty Tyler
yeah.
and your fine self, and that's available on Amazon. What does he say about it?
Well, he goes into quite a bit about this actually, and I won't go into blow by blow, but one of the things he's surprised by is he understands in his mind how the language evolved and how certain sounds and the diphthongs, and he gets into this long grammatical discussion and even indicates Here, I would have expected to find an internal vowel, and I didn't. And in other cases, I would have expected a forger, if it's a forgery, to leave a vowel out, and yet there is a vowel in it. So the first thing that's come to my mind, and I simply don't have the expertise in this yet, I plan on
Hmm.
studying this out, and that is to determine, is there a connection here? Let's say that our document, the Moses scroll, is truly an early manuscript, and let's say that Galil may be right, that in those early formative years where you begin to see internal matrix lectionis being used, could it be that our document is in that fluid period when there's not so certain and definite a yes we have, no we don't? And again, we even see there's some places in the Hebrew Bible where very common words are sometimes spelled one way, sometimes spelled another way.
Hmm.
David is the example I gave. So this, the reason that I'm not qualified to say whether that Gershon Galil is right. I don't know if he is. I don't know if he's drawn accurately what he sees, and I don't know if those who say it's just scratches, I don't know if they're right. But I can tell you this: if the drawing, if the drawing that Galil has published is an accurate representation of what is
Giving it the
etched
benefit of the doubt.
into the
Mm.
stone, I can see, even an untrained person can see how he interpreted it the way he did. Meaning, it's very simple. If Galil, I'm assuming Galil's drawing is right. Galil's drawing is right. I know how to spell these words in Hebrew, and I have his transcription, and I did it myself. And I said, okay, I have 20 words that I'm looking for here, and I have 63 letters. So I counted how many olives do I have, how many, resh, how many vav, and it's easy exercise. I published a document that breaks this down for you. It's called A Preliminary Key for the Jerusalem Stone Tablet, based on Professor Gershon Galil's drawing and transcription. It's on
Hmm.
my academia page. You can see. So the word curse, aurora, is used 7 times, mut 6 times, tamut is used 6 times, and then it's the title of the governor of the city. That's the only other
Hmm.
word in there. My point being, I go through and I say, how many olives am I looking for? I'm looking for 7 olives. So I look at the handy chart that Galil, I
Hmm.
figure this out, and I find 7 of them. And I look for the haze, and I only need one. I find it.
Hmm.
This is what Robert Deutsch says. Deutsch says, look, I look at this and it's easy to read. Now, let me qualify easy to read. If you know West Semitic, you know, script like they're
Mm.
talking about, that's not my field, obviously, but there are only so many letters and it's easy to figure out. But one of the things that Professor Rolston says is it's not so easy to read these inscriptions. Let me tell you why. At times, in English, we go left to right. In
Mhm.
Hebrew, it's right to left.
Mhm.
In these ancient, what Gershon Galil is calling Proto Canaanite,
Mhm.
it can go right to left, left to right, up and down and up, or as the cow plows the field. In other words, a line may begin going right to left and then left.
Oh,
So
right.
so
See,
the
I
way,
didn't know that. So I
yeah,
didn't know that, and which answers my next question, because at when you look at it, it really is sort of like trying to figure out a crossword puzzle. Um, okay, so that answers that. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
yeah, it's really a fun game. I would encourage people, if you want to have some fun. I even personally
Mm.
drew, and I'll put this is this is my little chart,
Mm.
and it's in the document that I posted. So I wanted to say, okay, here's what Galil is calling an aleph. And so I gave you some samples of
Mm.
my reproduction of his, map, because I didn't have permission to use his. So I made my own. So anyway, but it's a fun exercise because it's like you're decoding what could be this very ancient message. Now, you made a comment earlier, Jono, and you even kind of laughed about this. It's like, cursed are you, dying you will die, dying you will die. But here's the thing: we do get from this. There is this idea that ancient people truly believe. Now, there are people today who really believe that somebody can put a curse on someone else or a hex on somebody. But I think it was more prevalent in the ancient world. And the fact that we found, or that they found one, presumably at Mount Ebal, whether that is Mount Ebal and Zertal is correct, I don't know. The evidence, at least that he presents in his book, seems to indicate that he became very convinced, and others are very convinced that this is
Mhm.
it.
Mm.
But at a minimum, somebody in the ancient world, if Galil is right about the Ebal curse amulet, if he's right on that, somebody was associating, hey, this is the place of the curse. I'm going to go put my curse against whoever it is, because I think it's more effective maybe there. Now, why is this particular curse etched into stone in this place? I don't know that we can interpret that or derive that from what we know so far, but it is interesting, particularly if Eli Shukran and Yoel Ben Nun are right about this being some sort of sacred precinct, a Matsava Temple or a pillar temple, which is later, I guess you could say, decommissioned, and
Mhm.
it's cautiously interred. The way that Eli Shukran describes it is like they filled it, sealed it, and walked away.
Mhm.
And there it remained underground, buried by the ages, until the IAA and Eli Shukran dug it up.
Well, it's fascinating, and it continues to hit the headlines. We will keep an eye on it. Of course, the reason why we're talking about it is it's fresh off the press, and if it is what it's being claimed to be, it's highly significant and deserves to be discussed. We've been wanting to return to the actual text of the Shapira scroll because we're still working our way through that, but today was a day to touch on this inscription. Thanks for filling me in, Ross, because I really do feel so much more informed now. I haven't had a chance to do all the research that you've done on this. Daniel just said this inscription appears to me to be the interior of some sort of container, such as a box. Yeah, it seems to be
It
chiseled
does
out
have
like
sort of
that.
have a lip, it's like maybe
Yeah,
yeah, I know what he's talking about.
yeah, it's interesting.
It could very well be. Um, yeah, there's still a lot that we don't know, and certainly, as we said, Jonah and I are not claiming to be experts in any of the fields required to properly interpret, but we are digging into what the experts are saying, and it would be wonderful if we had some. Who knows? Maybe some input from some of the scholars who are actually debating this. But I tell you, it's going to be fun and engaging and interesting as these academic reports come in,
Mm,
particularly when Professor Gershon Galil publishes both the Ebal
yes.
inscription as well
Mm,
as this one. Because look, both of these have been claimed to be very significant, and I think
mm.
it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out.
Worth keeping an eye on. Daniel, do we have your permission to use your latest image as the feature image of this talk, of this discussion? I'm sure he's going to say yes because he's such a great guy.
Yeah,
But we
that's
want
right.
everybody to see that. So, and I'm going to, you and I will both be staring at that probably for the next hour when we get off this call. All
That's right. Well,
right.
what we want to do with these shows is we want people to engage and and ask questions, and we want to bring you the best information that we can. So feel free to offer us feedback and send questions in, because our intention is that every Thursday night we'll do something, whether it's Moses Scrolls, something biblically related,
Mm.
archaeologically. We really want to get into these topics and give you something to do on a Thursday night. I don't know what else is going on Thursdays, but it can't be as
Mm.
fun as this, you know.
Make yourself a nice cuppa, get into your
Yeah.
comfortable chair, and join us. Now, before we do wrap it up, are there any questions or comments from the boys and girls listening at home? Send them on through in the comments because we can see those. Yeah, Daniel said he's still working on images and there's more heading our way. So
Okay.
looking forward to seeing those. You're the man.
Outstanding. And right now we're just airing these on a few different locations. We can stream to 5, and hopefully people will find these of interest and beneficial and helpful and fun and join us. And so
Mm.
let other people know. So Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Central Time. And we look forward to next week. Jono, you have anything else? People can
Yeah,
still
all I'm going to say is that Cassandra says, I'm really enjoying these chats. Grand. Well, we enjoy having you here.
we do. Thanks
Um,
for joining.
just wanted to say that there is still obviously room available on our Tanakh tour of Israel in November, and following straight after that, our Biblical Jordan tour. There is still some places available. It is filling up, and we are starting to shore up our reservations. So if you're thinking about joining Ross and I, we would love to have you. And there's Marianne. And
Hey, Marianne.
then now is the time to secure your place with a deposit. And you can do that by going to tanaktours.com, because we're at that time of the year where we're starting to shore up reservations. So
That's right.
Pam says thanks, and Dave says thanks, very interesting. Great. I love you
Hey,
guys.
thanks everybody for joining us, and we look forward to these. And also, if you have other ideas that you'd like, let's say you see something in the news, you send it to Jono and I, and we can maybe entertain that on some of the future
Love to have a
shows.
look at it.
We'll be
So
happy to.
actually, before we disappear, yeah, Marianne says, does anyone know any idea who the governor might be? It depends on the date. I mean, it's much earlier than Herod the Great that she's asking, like much
Oh no,
older, yeah.
no, this is way earlier than that. You know,
Mm,
Herod the Great. You're talking, you're talking right below the change from BC to AD or
mm.
BCE to CE. This is 3,700 years old according to Galil's dating. It's
Oh, you just froze. Ross froze. There you go. You're not going to find out. But yeah, it's purported, Marianne, to be 37 centuries old. So I don't know. Melchizedek? Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, all right. Ross has disappeared. It's now the Jono show, and I've run out of tea. Yorkshire tea, proper strong. Oh, he's back. He's back.
hey,
So I'm going to go and make another cuppa in a minute. But
yep.
I think I just said maybe it's Melchizedek, Ross.
Yeah, well, actually, we'll have to talk a little bit about that. But Ellie Shukran certainly puts it at the time of the patriarchal narrative, and there are some very interesting things that you might say. Well, I don't know. But I mean, if we're talking, biblically, if you're following the chronology of the Bible, certainly the 18th century BCE is putting you at the time of Melchizedek as well as Abraham. So.
Mm, that's all I can
In other
think of for
words,
name.
this temple would be built in a time that is that early in the biblical narrative. So
Sure.
it wouldn't be Jerusalem then; it would be Salem. Put it that way.
Mm, mm.
All right, Jono.
Good, good. We are done, boys and girls. See you again this time next week. And until then, have a great one.
Have a beautiful week.